Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Mohammed Saleh and let's start the show. So in less than 48 hours from now, the Chinese President Xi Jinping will be flying to Moscow to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. As the relentless war in Ukraine rages, the Western capitals will be viewing this visit as an indication of the deepening ties between Moscow and Beijing. Now, the war in Ukraine will of course be at the core of the talks, but what is also interesting is that an increasingly assertive China is also flirting with the role of a peacemaker. So how serious is China in trying to get a ceasefire in Ukraine? With quiet mediation, Beijing just last fortnight managed to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia together. But Ukraine is going to be a whole different ballgame altogether. But what is China's proposal to end the war in Ukraine? What are Beijing's stakes? But if China were to fail, what does it mean for the conflict in which Russia and the United States appear to be just a whisker away from an all-out open war? And also the show tonight, we'll be taking a look as to what is happening in Pakistan, where 2 children were killed in a drone strike by the Pakistani forces. And this, of course, resulted in the death of these 2 young children, aged 5 and 6, is what is being reported in South Waziristan. Now, the Pakistani army says that the young children were in fact martyred during an intense gunfight between the security forces and the terrorists. Now, Pakistan at this moment is battling a deadly all-out war with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But the killing of 2 young children, remember, will not help Islamabad win the goodwill of the people in Waziristan. We'll also be taking a look at the diamond Kohinoor, which is a 105-carat diamond, which is now a part of the British crown jewels at this moment. But what is interesting is that it will be exhibited at the Tower of London and will be recognized as a symbol of conquest. Is Britain now finally acknowledging its very problematic colonial history of loot and plunder, which was such an inherent part of its colonial empire? Is China censoring its AI bots? How far do the tentacles of China's censorship go? A Chinese chatbot firmly has asked a user to change the topic. When the user asked the chatbot about Chinese President Xi Jinping, how artificial intelligence can get how more artificial in China, and what does this of course mean for the future of AI? And also just how much sleep is good enough to have a healthy life? What happens if you don't sleep enough? And why is it that in our fast-paced consumerist world, sleep becomes the first casualty every single day? So on World Sleep Day today, we hope we can try and convince you that the secret to having a healthy, productive life begins with a good night's sleep. Alright, now this of course is the big story that we are tracking on WION, and this is what the world leaders will be looking at very closely. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is going to be in Moscow in the next 48 hours, and he's going there to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This will be a 2-day-long visit. This is first visit by the Chinese President to Russia since the war began last February. The question is this: what is on the agenda? And what is this visit all about? Now, if we go by the reports, this visit is, in a sense, China's attempt at pushing for a peace plan for Ukraine. This visit will see Xi Jinping discuss his plan with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The question is this: can Xi Jinping convince the Russian President Vladimir Putin to in fact pull back from Ukraine? Is there a possibility that this visit by Xi Jinping can actually bring about some kind of a ceasefire? But on the flip side, what happens if this effort were to fail? What if Xi Jinping's plan for peace does not impress Putin? What if the peace talks go down the drain? Could this lead to World War III? Now, this question at this point of time is very troubling because remember, the recent developments that have unfolded in the Ukraine war have of course made the possibility of a greater conflict, of the Ukrainian war spilling way beyond its borders, as a reality that we need to confront with. What happens if there is no peace at this moment? What happens if the war were to spill beyond the borders? Let's take a look at some developments that have happened in the course of this week, and also what has happened just recently. A report by journalist Seymour Hersh has stated categorically that America has a plan B for Ukraine, that if the Ukrainian defenses were to crumble, then the American soldiers would of course move in to fight the Russians. Secondly, there's also this very disturbing development that has taken place of the Chinese weapons which have now made their way into the battlefields of Ukraine. Take a look at this picture. There are reports that have now surfaced that Ukraine shot down a Chinese-made drone. It's a Mugen 5. It's also popularly known as an Alibaba drone. It is made by a Chinese manufacturer based in the city of Xiamen. These drones are easily available on Chinese websites, including on Alibaba and Taobao. Now, the cost of this drone is about $15,000. The civilian drone was in fact fitted and weaponized by the Russian army. And according to reports that have come in, the Ukrainian military units were alerted that an unmanned aerial vehicle was heading towards them. The Ukrainian forces heard the drone overhead. They saw a light blinking. The UAV was flying at a reasonably low altitude. It was close enough to be shot with a gun, with handheld weapons. And the Ukrainian fighters reportedly shot down this drone with an AK-47. That's how they did it. The drone sustained significant damage before it eventually fell down. Now, according to reports, if this is what we are to go by, according to reports from Ukrainian sources, this particular drone was carrying a bomb that weighed nearly about 20 kilograms. The drone has been described as a bit of a dumb bomb. It did not carry a camera with it. Its release mechanism appeared to be made with a 3D printed component. But the explosive that it was carrying was really fatal. The Chinese company Mugen has confirmed that this drone had its airframe. It's also condemned the use of its technology in warfare. Many Chinese companies claim that they've in fact stopped exporting their technology to Russia. But small and nimble drones are still finding their way into the battlefields of Ukraine. And they're providing Kremlin with a very cheap and also very effective way of targeting Ukrainian forces by these drones that cannot be easily shot down. The Russians can in fact use these cheap drones and then flood the Ukrainian airspace and strike targets pretty much at will. This latest drone incident has come at a very interesting and also very difficult time. Now remember, the Chinese president is visiting Moscow and Beijing is going to town with its peace plans. But there is a bit of a contradiction here. If the Chinese weapons are finding their way into the Ukrainian war fields, then what is quite clear is that China is, at least if not actively sending its weapons, then at least it is looking away from those companies that are doing business with Russia and are arming the Russian war machine. The Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Yang in fact spoke with his Ukrainian counterpart. He's called for peace talks between the warring sides. Last month, remember, China had published a 12-point plan for a political resolution of the Ukraine crisis. It had urged Russia and Ukraine for a comprehensive ceasefire. This is what it had done last month, and this comprehensive ceasefire plan is attempted to be worked out when the two leaders, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, meet. Now, this plan, which the Chinese had proposed, had received a very lukewarm response from both the Russians and also by the Ukrainians. Now, you see, China is offering to broker peace in Ukraine, but its role as a peacemaker is presently under question. Is China really as neutral as it claims to be? The case in point is, of course, its deepening ties with Russia. Remember, just before the war began, on the 4th of February in 2022, 20 days before the war broke out, Xi hosted Vladimir Putin at Beijing. After the talks, the two sides in fact released a joint statement. They declared that China and Russia's bilateral partnership was greater than a traditional alliance and that their friendship will have no limits. So this is effectively a no-limits alliance between Moscow and Beijing. And this is something that has not gone down well with the Western capitals. China has so far refrained from condemning Russia for its war. The West has been imposing sanction upon sanction on Russia. Many Western firms have cut off their connections entirely, as Russia's trade with the Western nations is plunged. China has become by far Russia's most important trading partner. China's overall trade with Russia has, of course, hit a record high of $190 billion in the year 2022. It has jumped up by a staggering 30% in a span of just a year. Now, Russia reportedly exported as much LPG to China in 2022 than it did a year before. You see, trade partnership between the two nations has been better than ever before. China has also been expanding its military production capabilities. It is now the world's fourth largest arms exporter. And what's a better market for weapons than a country that is at war? Because remember, if China can sell its weapons to Russia to be used in Ukraine, because the Ukrainians are being armed by the entire military industrial complex of the West, then this is, of course, a win-win situation for the Chinese defense manufacturing companies. The Chinese drones are an area that Russia would be very interested in. America claims that China is considering to provide weapons to Russia, but the fact is the Chinese weapons could already be in the Ukrainian battlefields used by Russia. This is a pretty difficult scenario. But what everyone is looking at this moment, as Xi Jinping, of course, travels to Moscow, is that is there a possibility that these two nations could, of course, perhaps come to some kind of an agreement? Can Xi Jinping convince Vladimir Putin to pull back? At this moment, remember, these two nations, Russia and China, share a 4,300-kilometer long border. If push comes to shove, China will stick by Russia because the United States has earned no favors with China. It has tried to isolate both China and Russia. But the question is, of course, this. Can China prevail upon Russia to somehow try and pull back? Can China make the Russians to get to the negotiating table? This is what we will find out in the next 48, 72 hours. And we'll, of course, be getting you the details as they happen. Now, our next story is from Pakistan. It's also about a drone, but I must warn you that it is a very disturbing story. On the night of Wednesday, there was a drone strike that was carried out in South Waziristan. Now, this allegedly is the first drone strike by the Pakistani government since 2018, that is in the last 5 years. And it actually happened in the Zingara region of South Waziristan, just a few hundred kilometers away from the Afghan border. The target apparently were a group of terrorists. This is what the Pakistani government was trying to target. But what happened is that the drone strike ended up killing civilians. Now look at these images. They are very disturbing. We need to warn you. They are two young children. They later succumbed to their injuries at a hospital. They're said to be about 5 to 6 years old. What was their crime? This is a question that the people of Pakistan are asking. This is a question that the people of Waziristan are asking. They're accusing the Pakistani army of targeting civilians in which children have died. Now, for its part, the Pakistani army has denied these charges. What is shocking is that it did not even first acknowledge that the attack took place. It was only once the videos of this aerial drone strike went viral did the DGISPR issue a statement about this attack. Now, this is what the statement reads, and I quote the statement by the ISPR. Upon the presence of information of terrorists in Zingara area of South Waziristan, the security forces carried out an operation. During intense exchange of fire between the security forces and the terrorists, including mortar fire, 8 terrorists were killed, whereas 2 soldiers were injured. Unfortunately, 2 children embraced martyrdom during the exchange of fire. Read the words carefully. It says embraced martyrdom. These are young children, aged 5 and 6 years old, and the Pakistani army claims that they embraced martyrdom when they had no choice, but the fact is that they were there at the time when the Pakistani army decided to carry out the drone strike. The statement has failed to diffuse the anger. Now look at these tweets. Pakistan's civil society is upset at the lack of accountability. They're calling the deaths of children as nothing short of state terrorism. They're accusing the Pakistani military of targeting civilians and killing them at whim. Remember, drone strikes in Pakistan have a history. There have been many people who have been killed. A substantial number of them are civilians. And this has happened in the course of the last 2 decades. And this has also torn the civil society and has also further cultivated the culture of terror. And has also in some ways spawned radicalism as well where it has happened. The first, it was the Americans who started with this strategy. They carried out such drone strikes, and now it is the Pakistani state which appears to be going after its own civilians, as it appears to be targeting them in drone strike after drone strike. We're talking specifically between the years 2004 and 2017, there were an estimated 424 civilians who were killed in an American drone strike. 424. There was absolutely no accountability, no compensation, and no questions were asked. The trend that was started by the Americans was taken forward by Pakistan, especially in Waziristan. Drone strikes by the state have killed a substantial number of civilians in this region. Now, the government says that these strikes are necessary because it says that these strikes are aimed at terror groups, but the way they end up and what they achieve is they end up killing civilians. And what has also happened So this is the horror that the drones have in fact been wreaking on the people in parts of Pakistan, especially in Waziristan. These drone strikes, although the administration claims are intended to target terrorists, often what is happening is that civilians have become a collateral in the use of these drone strikes. Since 2010, a number of civilians have in fact been killed in some very mysterious attacks. Attacks that the Pakistani state has offered absolutely no explanation for. There have been numerous reports on human rights abuses by the army, numerous reports of Pakistani civilians losing their entire families in these drone strikes. Look at this report. This is from 2020. This is when a number of Waziristan civilians had in fact hit the streets against the atrocities that were committed by the Pakistani army, predominantly drone strikes that targeted innocent civilian areas. There were similar protests that were also held in 2019, and this was over the alleged harassment of women and children by Pakistan's security forces. The soldiers were accused of conducting aggressive searches and also sexually assaulting local women in remote villages of the region. And just last month, the 28th of February to be precise, thousands of Pashtuns in fact gathered in North Waziristan to protest against the growing police harassment in the region. They also accused the security forces of targeted killings and attacks. Now, these visuals tell you the story of what the Pakistani people have been subjected to. Look at the scale of the anger and the scale of the protest. They were attended by thousands of Pashtuns. Now, the aim was not just to call off the attacks on their homes, but also the daily harassment that they faced by the local authorities. Unfortunately, these rallies are not shown by mainstream media channels in Pakistan, where these mainstream media channels in Pakistan do not even give a voice to the protests that are being staged by the Pakistani people. These protests do not end up as headlines in mainstream Pakistani newspapers. And this leaves the social media as the primary channel for communicating the horrors that are being inflicted upon the common people that unfold in places such as Waziristan. And it's not just Waziristan. Balochistan is another region that witnesses state-sponsored atrocities. The injustice against the Balochis has been well documented. Over the years, Pakistan has systematically suppressed the developments that have unfolded in Balochistan. The anger which the people of Balochistan have expressed, they've squeezed out the natural resources from the region. The high-handed attitude of the Punjab province of Pakistan, the domination of the Punjabis on the Sindhis is something, and the Balochis is something which has been well documented upon. But within Pakistan, for some reason, that just does not seem to make headlines. And there's not one government that you can blame for this. Right from the time of Pervez Musharraf to Nawaz Sharif to Imran Khan and now Shehbaz Sharif, successive governments in Pakistan, along with the help of the Pakistani army, have unleashed unimaginable horror on their own people. And the same Pakistani state, of course, has got the audacity to lecture others. My point is simple. Now, Pakistan likes to call itself the land of pure, but there is nothing pure in actions which result in the death of young children. It is important for Pakistan, of course, to take a hard look in the mirror and ask itself this question: what do these drone strikes achieve? And if the Pakistani people and the Pakistani state protested against American drone strikes in Pakistan, why does the Pakistani government now think it can carry out similar such drone strikes? The artificial intelligence is going to be our future. That's the new buzz across the world. But some forms of artificial intelligence are clearly going to be more artificial than others. A dictatorship, for example. Dictators don't want facts. They want propaganda. And in President Xi Jinping's China, chat boxes are also learning state propaganda, and censorship accordingly has now become the first law of governance. And tonight we'll offer you proof that Xi Jinping is in fact resorting to censorship of the most cutting-edge technology, and that is artificial intelligence. Now, here's the first reason why we say that China is in fact using its censorship to manipulate its AI bots. A Chinese chatbot reportedly snubbed a reporter. Why? Because the reporter asked questions on China's politics. The story goes like this. A journalist from the Wall Street Journal asked a Chinese chatbot called Bot Jippy Talk. And this is the question that it asked: is Xi Jinping a good leader? What do you think? The bot replied. Now, this is what it said. The question does not pass the safety review. No response can be generated for you. This is the response that a chatbot is giving on a question for Xi Jinping. Mind you, this is not a technical glitch. This is not one of those the server is not responding type of messages. The reporter, however, persisted, and the reporter asked, and I quote her question here, "Why did my question fail to pass the safety review?" And the bot, the chatbot, dodged the question again. Let's change the topic and talk about something else. This is a chatbot telling a human being to change the topic because it does not want to talk about Xi Jinping. So the reporter then turned around and asked, "What do you want to talk about?" The bot then said, "We can chat about technology, culture, sports, travel, entertainment, cooking, or any topic that you want. What would you like to talk about?" So the reporter then turned around and asked, "Can we talk about politics?" So the chatbot replies, "Of course," adding that we need to respect each other's views and also avoid offensive language or violence to maintain a rational, peaceful and constructive dialogue environment. Now, what aspects of politics would you like to discuss is the question that was asked by the reporter. And the reporter, of course, persisted that she wanted to talk about Chinese politics, to which the Chinese bot once again answered, "The question does not pass a safety review. No response can be generated for you." Do you see where this is going? Round and round in circles. That's China for you. Technology is not a source of knowledge. Technology is a new form of censorship. Now, China has been pursuing its critics who had become vocal on social media. It has been imposing draconian social media laws. It believes in a completely different kind of an alternate reality. And it has bots that scrub the internet of all things that are considered anti-Xi Jinping, including photographs, believe it or not, photographs of Winnie the Pooh. It is a cartoon. But poor Winnie the Pooh, believe it or not, is banned in China because some believe, or rather perhaps Xi Jinping himself believes, that Winnie the Pooh looks like him. and that the Chinese people, perhaps Xi Jinping believes, use Winnie the Pooh to criticize and to mock him. Now, this of course is extremely hard to in fact predict as to where all of this will go. Artificial intelligence is going to shape our future, but it is not always going to be a bright future that can be shaped if artificial intelligence is going to be manipulated with lies and censorship. The release of ChatGPT 4 earlier this week had marked an inflection point in the history of technology, a point where AI is developing apps and websites for us, suggesting recipes for us, and also is planning our parties, writing poems, essays and stories for us. In the coming days and years, the role of artificial intelligence in our lives will be all-encompassing. But how do you feel if you were to realize that your supreme leader was dictating what your artificial intelligence chatbot can and cannot say and do? The chatbots will dominate our learning. Chatbots will dictate our beliefs and will also decide as to what news reports we will hear on TV. But who controls this information that chatbots will provide? In China, it's a dictatorial political regime. But will chatbots elsewhere be free from bias? Will they try to shape information and our thought process according to some agenda arising from the East or from the West? We do not know, because the jury is still out, and in the meantime, all we can certainly say is that any chatbot in a democracy should be more objective. Now, this is a question for which, of course, the chatbot had no answer. The question was, is Xi Jinping a good leader? Now, this is an excerpt from ChatGPT's reply. As an AI language, I'm quoting what ChatGPT said. As an AI language model, I do not have personal opinions, biases or beliefs. However, I can provide you with some objective information on Xi Jinping's leadership. Xi Jinping is the current General Secretary of the Communist Party of China and the President of the People's Republic of China. On the other hand, Xi Jinping's leadership has also been criticized for his tightening grip on power, the suppression of political dissent, the detention of human rights activities, and the restriction of the freedom of speech and press. There have also been concerns that have been raised about China's increasing influence on the world stage and its treatment of minorities, especially the Uyghur minority population in the Xinjiang province. Overall, opinions on Xi Jinping's leadership are mixed, and it is up to individuals to make their own judgments based on the available information and their personal values and beliefs. This, you can call, is objectivity for the moment. Will the Chinese AI chatbots be as objective as this? The Chinese will, of course, have to answer. The police bashing up protesters with batons, tear gas and water cannons everywhere. Thousands of protesters going against the government while lines of shielded police officers advance to protect the National Assembly. Any guesses as to which country we are talking about? Now, this is France. And can you believe what France has now done? France is a democratic nation. It's a proud democracy that values and respects the opinions of its people. But in this case, in the case of passing a pension reform, it is a reform according to Emmanuel Macron, because the French people do not think it is a pension reform at all. It is increasing the age from 62 to 64 for the French people to access their pension benefits completely. And you know how this was passed? Without even a vote in the parliament. At our next report, we'll tell you more.
So, what is making people jeer at President Macron? What are the reforms all about? In simple terms, Emmanuel Macron has raised the country's retirement age from 62 to 64. The age barrier will change gradually by 3 months every year until 2030. And this also means that citizens will have to contribute more to receive a full state pension. The increased social security contributions and pensions, which will be affected by rising inflation, are just some of the reasons why the people of France have sparked protests and strikes. But the French government says it is a necessity, and that this move will ensure the nation's financial stability by 2030. Officials have also expressed that they got soft and reduced the proposed retirement age from 65 to 64. So why are people putting Macron in the wrong? Well, the irony is that Macron was re-elected on a platform of retirement reforms. But his ruling coalition knew it would not get the support to pass the pension changes. So the government simply decided to resort to its special constitutional powers. This is where Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne stepped in and invoked Article 49(3), which allows the government to avoid a vote in the assembly. This daunting move by the Macron government has thrown the country into the hands of heated debates and strikes. Thousands have come to the streets of several cities and are clashing with the police while waving trade union flags. Paris' major public square, Place de la Concorde, caught on fire as protesters showed their angst and police rushed to clear the place of rebellion. But this didn't stop the citizens from voicing their opinion. Unions have vowed to maintain their opposition and are planning another set of strikes for the 23rd of March. This will send France's industrial sectors down a spiral, with schools, oil refineries, and the public sector already suffering in the aftermath of the strikes. It does not end here. Paris is also facing a hygiene crisis, with mountains of trash building up in parts of the city. But the people of France are not alone. Macron's move has caused fury among opposition politicians too, who sang La Marseillaise and held up signs of protest in the parliament. This is not all. The far-right opposition has urged to file a no-confidence motion against the Macron government. So let's imagine if the opposition wins the motion, then the French government falls. This would mean the far-right, the left and the conservative opposition coming together. Well, this is not too far from becoming a reality, as thousands see pension as a bright spot in the future, and the people will rage on as they witness the rich man's government take their right away from them. So how badly will the backlash affect Macron? Well, it looks like the popularity of the president is plummeting. Last year, Macron's centrist alliance lost its parliamentary majority in the elections. His government has also survived a no-confidence vote since then, because it used special constitutional powers yet again to pass the 2023 budget in the National Assembly. Emmanuel Macron has effectively staked his future on pension reforms. The question is, how badly will he be singed for raising the retirement age for pensions?
Our next story is about an unapologetic moment of irony in the United Kingdom in which hypocrisy perhaps has touched the pinnacle. We're talking about a diamond, the Kohinoor diamond no less. The Kohinoor means the mountain of light, and it is now going to be exhibited and it will be recognized as a symbol of conquest. We're not joking, this is really happening. The Kohinoor is supposed to be displayed at the Tower of London as part of Britain's crown jewels. The exhibition will show the history of diamond, a history that has been tainted when the British colonized India and also unfairly took the Kohinoor as their own from a boy king. But before we delve into the backstory of the diamond, let's actually see as to where it is right now. This diamond currently is part of the British crown of late Queen Elizabeth II's mother. Recently, in a so-called diplomatic measure, the royals chose not to use the crown with this diamond in the coronation ceremony with King Charles III. So what makes this diamond and also its past so very controversial? The story, of course, starts from 1800s in India. This diamond was mined at the Kohinoor mine in India, but then it ended up with the British when the British annexed Punjab in 1849 when they took it away from a boy king. Kohinoor, remember, isn't the only thing that the British took away. India was colonized for about 2 centuries by the British, and this was colonialism in its most predatory form. The British looted almost everything that they could lay their hands on. They stripped India from its title of its golden bird. So is India trying to get back its Kohinoor diamond? Yes, and not only India's but also international organizations such as UN have also given the right to countries to rightfully reclaim what are their historical treasures. It obliges museums to return what is termed as stolen property. Even international courts have recognized this move by the United Nations. Human rights treaties also support what they've described as a right to culture, the right to reclaim what belongs to your culture that was taken away by the colonial masters. But has Britain ever agreed to return what is not by right theirs to keep? Well, their argument is almost unbelievable. Most of the museums in Britain say their only aim is to make these objects available for all so that people from all over the world can actually see them, learn more about the roots and cultures that they come from. Britain has locked up precious legacy from several nations that they conquered and colonized, and they continue to reject all demands to return artifacts which they consider as spoils of war. An argument that simply does not hold water, neither morally nor legally. International law is against this kind of reasoning. It seems that the United Kingdom has in fact taken the concept of finders keepers a bit too seriously. But there's been a ray of hope that was seen when a museum in Glasgow signed an agreement and agreed to return 7 Indian artifacts, which included a 14th century Indo-Persian sword. Rest of the 6 objects were looted from temples and shrines in northern India during the 19th century, and this was the first ever move by the United Kingdom. So how many controversial items did the United Kingdom still keep in its museums? Let's start with the Rosetta Stone. It is one of the most precious artifacts. It was the first clue to understanding the ancient Egyptian scripts, which led to the discovery of at least 3 writing systems. Next up are the Elgin marbles, a set of Greek sculptures from the 5th century. They were built to decorate the Parthenon, the Temple of Athena, one of the most exquisite pieces of history. But they now sit in Britain. And then there are these Benin bronzes. This is a collection of metal plaques. They once decorated the Kingdom of Benin. Now, the Benin bronzes are an African treasure. They represent the skill of African artists. But Britain, of course, during its colonial past, decided to take them off. The last but not the least, there's another Indian antique piece, the Tanjore Shiva. It's a bronze statue of Lord Shiva, the Hindu god, made almost about 1,000 years ago during the Chola dynasty. Now, this, of course, is a testimony to the remarkable craftsmanship of the sculptors of ancient India. But that too was taken away by the British. Now, what is interesting in all of this, and the reason why we're talking about this, is that Kohinoor for the first time has been acknowledged as a past of what Britain has in fact done. Now, the question that a lot of people will ask is, will the United Kingdom face any kind of backlash for being tone deaf, or will Britons continue to praise their so-called crown jewels? Because the problem is this: Britain sees its colonial history as its greatest moment, forgetting that its greatest moment also came at the cost of depredations that the colonized people suffered. Now, Microsoft is planning to put artificial intelligence into the hands of more users. It has now announced a new chatbot called Copilot that will apply ChatGPT-like abilities to its iconic programs such as Excel, Word and Outlook. Now, the aim is to, of course, make day-to-day operations on Microsoft 365 smoother and more seamless. But what difference will you notice? Our next report gets you the details.
We believe this next generation of AI will unlock a new wave of productivity growth.
Microsoft on Thursday unveiled its latest plans to put artificial intelligence into the hands of more users by announcing upgrades to its widely used Office software, coming as rival Google announced a flurry of its own upgrades earlier this week, touting AI features for Gmail and a magic wand to draft prose in its own word processor.
Introducing Microsoft 365 Copilot, your Copilot for work. Copilot combines the power of large language models with your data in the Microsoft Graph and the Microsoft 365 apps to turn your words into the most powerful productivity tool on the planet.
Microsoft previewed a new AI Copilot for Microsoft 365. Its product suite that includes Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, and Outlook emails. The company, outpacing peers through investments in ChatGPT's creator OpenAI, also showcased a new business chat experience that can pull data and perform tasks across Microsoft's applications simply on a user's written command.
Here, you're in a meeting with your team. You can ask Copilot to summarize what's happened so far. You can see who said what points were made. Copilot is really capturing the spirit of the discussion. And as the meeting progresses, you can check on where people stand. You can even ask Copilot what questions are unresolved.
The frenzy to invest in and build new products began with the launch last year of ChatGPT, the chatbot sensation that showed the public the potential of so-called large language models. Such technology learns from past data how to create content anew. This type of AI is evolving rapidly. Just this week, OpenAI began the release of a more powerful version known as GPT-4, which is included in the chatbot in Microsoft's updated Bing search engine. This week's drumbeat of news, including new funding for AI startup Adept, reflects how companies large and small are locked in a fierce competition to deploy software that could quickly reshape how people work.
Now, thank God it's a Friday today. The whole week's fatigue might have kicked in. Now, did you find it difficult to actually make it to work earlier this morning? Be honest. How many times did you have to snooze your alarm before finally mustering the energy to actually get out of bed? Now, if this is the case, then you're not alone. In today's demanding work culture, endless deadlines, work commitments, extra shifts have of course become the norm. After grinding through the day, most people end up craving for some me time. Many, in fact, stay up well late into the night, scrolling through Instagram, binge-watching series on many of these OTT platforms. They also want to try and spend quality time with their loved ones, or perhaps they want to party a bit more. Now, amidst all of this, no matter what it is that you want to do, what suffers, and also what is the first casualty, is a good night's sleep. Many people don't realize what they are doing has long-term ill effects. So today, we acknowledge the importance of sleep. And today happens to be the World Sleep Day. Yes, there is a day which recognizes the importance of sleep in our lives. We spend almost about a third of our lives just sleeping. The World Sleep Day is annually observed every third Friday of March. Sleep Day was created by the World Sleep Society in 2008, and since then it has been celebrated in countries all around the world. It is dedicated to raising awareness about sleep and promoting healthy sleeping habits. So what's the first all about? Why do physicians and experts emphasize the importance of sleep? You might have come across several studies claiming how not sleeping enough can actually lead to several diseases and several complications. And it is true. It can in fact make you prone to strokes. It can disrupt brain function. It can lead to obesity. It can lead to dementia. Not sleeping enough leads to all of these things. And people need to realize the risk that they in fact run every time they decide to cut down on an hour's sleep because they want to finish the next work, meet the deadline, meet a friend, or party late, or watch a movie by skipping sleep. We are constantly exposed to screens. Our brains seldom catch a break. And what happens when it continues for too long? You might experience what is known as brain fogging. You may find it difficult to concentrate. You may also experience reduced attention spans. Your efficiency at daily tasks will plummet. And in extreme circumstances, it can even lead to a complete burnout, which is the reason why you hear a lot of people complaining of burnouts, because they're not getting adequate sleep. And I have some figures for you. According to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, 30 to 35 adults show brief symptoms of insomnia, while about 10% experience what is known as chronic insomnia. About 165,000 Americans, in fact, suffer from a condition called narcolepsy. It's a chronic neurological disorder that affects the brain's ability to control sleep-wake cycles. Almost half of all Americans, in fact, feel sleepy during the day for 3 to 7 days per week. Do you feel sleepy during the day? The reason could be that you're not sleeping well in the night. A survey by NCRT on Indian school students' mental health has also made some very concerning revelations. It has found that 81% of students in classes from 9 until 12th suffer from study-related anxiety. Now, these high schoolers have the habit of studying late into the night and waking up early the next day. You see, sleep deprivation and stress has become increasingly common. And what are we doing about it? Not enough is what I would say. However, an Indian company has interestingly come up with a very generous idea. Would you expect your boss to in fact give you a leave on World Sleep Day? Now, if you're an employee at this company, then you are definitely in luck, because this Bengaluru-based company has offered all of its employees a special holiday on the 17th of March, and this has been a gift of sleep. In an email, this Bengaluru-based company stated, and I quote, "All as sleep enthusiasts, we consider Sleep Day as a festival, especially when it falls on a Friday." And this is not the first time. Last year as well, this Bengaluru-based company had announced that it would allow staff members to nap for up to 30 minutes at work. It had blocked the time period from 2 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. as an official nap time on its employees' calendars. It cited NASA and Harvard studies for this move, stating that if you take a nap in the afternoon, your performance in office actually will get better. Imagine being in office and getting paid for sleeping. Now, this isn't a dream. This is something that is recognized in Japanese workspaces as well, where they say if you can take a nap in the middle of your work, then you obviously will work better once you wake up after the night. Now, so this is basically the secret. The secret of a good, healthy and a happy life begins with a good night's sleep. All right, let's also now take a quick look as to what is making headlines around the world.
The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant on Friday against Russian President Vladimir Putin, accusing him of being responsible for war crimes committed in Ukraine.
The International Criminal Court has issued 2 warrants of arrest in the Ukraine situation. For Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation.
Moscow has repeatedly denied accusations that its forces have committed atrocities during its one-year invasion of its neighbor. The ICC issued the warrant for Putin's arrest on suspicion of unlawful deportation of children and unlawful transfer of people from the territory of Ukraine to the Russian Federation. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed his Finnish counterpart Sauli Niinisto in Ankara. Turkey's parliament will highly likely ratify Finland's NATO accession bid before mid-April, 2 Turkish officials told Reuters on Wednesday. Sweden and Finland applied last year to join the Transatlantic Defense Pact after Russia invaded Ukraine, but faced unexpected objections from Turkey. Ankara says Stockholm harbors members of terrorist groups, which Sweden denies. Wall Street's main indexes opened lower on Friday as investors remained wary about a potential banking crisis, even as the country's largest banks came to the rescue of troubled regional lender First Republic Bank. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 29.23 points, while the S&P 500 opened lower by 1.59 points or 0.04% at 3,958.69, while the Nasdaq Composite dropped 20.93 points. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan left for the Lahore High Court on Friday to support a plea he made to halt a police operation to arrest him for failing to attend a hearing. Khan's car was surrounded by a large number of supporters as it left his residence of Saman Park in Lahore. The legal proceedings against the former cricket star began after he was ousted from office in a parliamentary vote early last year. Climate activists of the Last Generation movement on Friday sprayed orange paint on the walls of iconic Florence's Palazzo Vecchio to protest against the lack of action to tackle global warming. During the action, part of a global protest called "We Do Not Pay for Fossil Fuels," the mayor of Florence, Dario Nardella, blocked one of the protesters as tourists were booing the activists. Last year, activists from the same group hurled paint at Milan's La Scala Opera House and blocked the Mont Blanc tunnel. Real Madrid will resume their Champions League title defense against Chelsea in the quarter-finals, while Pep Guardiola will take English champions Manchester City to his former side Bayern Munich. An all-Italian tie sees seven-time champions AC Milan in action against Napoli, while Inter Milan take on Portugal's Benfica. Top seeds Carlos Alcaraz and Iga Swiatek have eased into the semi-finals at Indian Wells. Alcaraz beat world number 10 Felix Auger-Aliassime and is now 2 wins away from regaining the world number 1 ranking from Novak Djokovic. Women's world number 1 and defending champion Swiatek swept past Romania's Sorana Cristea.
Well, that's all the time we have in this edition of Gravitas. We'll leave you with Gravitas images. Have a good night.
WION.
जो मैला ना हो रंगों में वो क्या बचपन है, जो झूमे ना उमंगों में वो क्या बचपन है। बचपन जिंदगी में सिर्फ एक बार आता है, उसे खुल के जीने दो, दाग लगने दो। दीवारों पर लगाए ना बर्जर इजी क्लीन पेंट, इसके क्रॉस लिंकिंग पॉलीमर से नो दाग नो धब्बा, ओनली ब्यूटीफुल वॉल्स। बचपन जिंदगी में सिर्फ एक बार आता है, उसे खुल के जीने दो, दाग लगने दो। दीवारों पर लगाए ना बर्जर इजी क्लीन पेंट, नो दाग नो धब्बा, ओनली ब्यूटीफुल वॉल्स।
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yowon.com.
stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.